Y bueno, pues a continuación voy a presentarles a Greg Xu. Greg nos va a hablar pues, de un tema que ya es, igual que lo de la identidad digital, un tema que ya es un constante. Los pagos de servicios electrónicos, los cimientos que nos van a permitir entender qué es el banking. Pues de esto nos habla Greg Xu en su conferencia PSD2, An Open Banking, a Stepstone to an Open Digital Financial World. And here he is, already.
Buenos dias, Mexico. Sorry, I had to do that. I felt like a fat version of Bono putting this thing on, so I thought I'd do the rock star entry. That's my second apology coming up next, because that's about 20% of my total Spanish vocabulary, so the rest of this will be in English. PSD2 and open banking, you've probably heard a lot about it over the last couple of days. I know my colleagues who've been speaking, Benjamin, Dahl, Rishi, and Hugh Williams, have all talked you through what this is, what this does, and what it means, and why it came about, what ecosystems it creates and enables. So I'm hoping that I won't bore you to death by repeating what you've already heard. I'm instead going to be looking at it from a slightly more critical angle, which is where it sits in the continuum of digitalization. So here's the opening question. Now, this is a neat question for dividing the room, to find out how many people in this room are geeks of a certain age who will therefore know what 42 is. Hands up if you do. Oh, tough audience. Maybe Douglas Adams wasn't translated into Spanish, but 42 is the answer to everything according to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. PSD2 well, this is how things tend to work in fintech land. In fintech land, we like to tell very large lies about what we can and cannot do and pretend that the little things that we do are enormously relevant. So there's a lot going on to try and portray PSD2 as being 42, the answer to everything, the ability to take retail operations into the banking system and make the banking system digital. And I think a lot of it comes down to a resentment, almost like a teenage angst in regards to 2008. Going back to that, the banks ruined it for everybody, so why don't we ruin it for the banks? And, you know, it looks good that you've got these big companies like Facebook and Google who are coming in and potentially eating the bank's lunch. But you have to ask the question, is that sustainable? If the banks are having to pay for the cost of custody because ultimately the money still sits in your bank account, is that a viable stratagem where they can't make money out of doing that? Is it fair, and let's not be childish and go back to 2008, is it fair that the bank is sitting under a welter of ever-growing regulation, and here's this fintech company who, by and large, have little regard for regulation, accessing effectively banking services at almost no cost to themselves? You'd have to question how sustainable a model that is if the banks can't make money. Now, historically, the banks have failed to use the rich data that's being made available to them in the past. They have failed to take the opportunities that are being given. And yes, PSD2 does create the opportunity where competition can come in and begin to force their hand and make them look to see how they can innovate, how they can move the game forward. And you are seeing that. There are banks who are stepping into that. I think BBVA have been one that's done a lot of work in this regard. HSBC have got a product they're coming to market with in the UK. And so it goes on. But actually, you know, I had a good giggle on LinkedIn the other day because there was this post by this person who was a typical fintech guru, except he didn't have a specialization in AI, apparently. But he was specialized in private data, fintech, blockchain, and DLT. So we had 4 out of 5 of the so-called guru skills. And he was celebrating the fact that Google have entered the market. And I would question that, because actually you would have heard this from the previous speakers. The point of PSD2 is that you own your data. You own your financial data. What you do with it, what you choose to do with it, is what matters. And here are the 2 biggest abusers of your data, and God help me if any of their lawyers are in the room, Facebook and Google, who are coming into this market, getting their PSD2 licenses, and they are quite happy that they can get your informed, explicit consent in the manner required under the regulation. And all of a sudden, they have even more rich data to play with. So I don't know who's worse. And I put it to you to ask this question. Who is worse? The banks who've had to learn their lessons and to some extent have reformed, or the unreformed Silicon Valley gods? So ultimately, here's what I think of PSD2. It is little more than lipstick on a pig. Why? Well, because all it's really doing is scratching the surface of digitization. That's all it does. You still underneath it, if you think of it like a series of layers, up here you have the retail customer, then you have your app, and then you have your API, and then underneath that you still have the old banking system struggling to keep going. And the reality of how the banks today work, the banking system works, is not systemic. It's actually because they have incredible people working for them who work incredibly hard to keep a broken system ticking over and moving forward. And you've heard this from my other colleagues as well. They talk to you about how legacy banking underpins this system. So I think if everyone's happy that the euphemism works, we'll move on to this piece. So I've talked about digitization. What is digitization? Digitization is a process of making the inefficient marginally more efficient. It is the process by which we went from having a pony take a letter from one end of a country to another in order to do business, to getting it to go by email. It used to take 3 weeks, 400 years ago, now it takes 0.3 seconds. That's digitization. We've made the inefficient marginally more efficient. We've communicated data from point to point marginally more efficiently than we did last year. Digitalization is to remove all of that inefficiency completely. It is a whole new way of thinking. It is not about making the inefficiently marginally more efficient. It's about removing that inefficiency from the system. And if you go back to the context I spoke of with the pig and the lipstick is digitization. The pig is digitalization. It's the elephant in the room, if you'll forgive the additional animal metaphor. The key to digitalization, actually, these slides are the wrong way around. This is the right way around. We'll go back to the other one. The key to digitalization is taking the plunge. It's about changing the way we think about all of these things. So historically, we've thought about how we might get an incremental gain in efficiency and how we might get a little bit more business this year. Or you have the American public limited company model, which is long-term destruction of value through misincentivization of executives. This is about changing everything in that context. Instead of I win, you lose, which is the way we've done business for a few hundred years, it needs to become I win, you win, we win. You need to move away from the old way of thinking. You need to start thinking about how we can work in partnership. You know, in this event for the last few days, I haven't been walking around saying, we have this incredible piece of technology and we're going to screw all of you. I've been saying, we're building this incredible piece of technology and would love to work with you because we're a few years away from being able to bring that to market, and there are things we want to see happening now. So how can we work together? But underpinning the move from digitization to digitalization is one key thing. And this is where we go back. Human governance. So in this picture, you can see a very large, very strong animal being controlled by a very thin, very small rein and a little bitty person on top. Dressage. Noted for the fact that you have this incredible amount of control over this enormously powerful beast. And if you take that as being the human, and this as being the machine, that's the euphemism. It's human governance. How do we have human governance? Well, we have contracts. We have regulation. But at the moment, those contracts, those regulations, well, they're all documents of failure. What we've been working on, and some of you will have heard me talk about this, is operating governing code, which would allow us to make contracts, regulation, interchangeable with code, and therefore allow human beings to govern transactional processes and remove themselves completely from it. So instead of being a cog in the machine, we make human beings what they should be, which is observers of the machine, who are free to use their brains, their creativity, their thinking, their ability to communicate, to build ties, to cooperate. And what are we trying to do? So we're engaging with banks, we're engaging with infrastructure players, and we're talking to them about building a secure settlement and custody network. The euphemism I make is a bit like a bathtub. The account system that we use is the water. The accounts themselves are the rubber duckies. So we want to talk to all the other banks out there, and we're going to go for regulation as a bank ourselves to do this. We want to go and talk to them about building a lattice of custody that uses a completely digital platform, which we call, because we're really good at naming things, the digital financial network. So last words. What have I got to say to Mexico? Apart from thank you for having me and thank you for inviting me, and God knows it was very brave given the things I'm likely to say. What I want to say to you guys is this. You are the gateway to South America. You have an incredible opportunity to lead the way here. This, you walk around the streets here. I've never been to Mexico before. You walk around the streets here and you see major global banks with very significant presence here. You have the ability to do something incredible. You have the ability to build a completely new financial system here in a way that is built on what I talked about, not necessarily digitalization, but I win, you win, we win. If you can do that, if you can lead Latin America as a financial center, I believe that Mexico's future as a financial center could be absolutely incredible. You are a key driver in the success of this emerging market, and probably the most exciting emerging market in the world, bar none. And with that, thank you. Are there any questions? Really? I didn't get one person think that I had bad things to say and want to challenge me angrily and tell me how I'm an idiot? Okay, that's a first. Thank you.